All right. Well, in Halitics, I'm Hal Ginsberg, and we've got Arlen looking down. I don't know what he's seeing down there, but he had something he was
Make sure my phone's off.
adjusting, I guess.
I'm here.
All right. We're so psyched to have Arlen here on a Halitics Tuesday, a Tuesday with Arlen. Arlen, how are you today?
I'm fine. It's been 2 weeks actually since I was last on, and we've had some fun events here, related to Halloween and sports, and things are happening that kind of help keep my mind off of Washington D.C. at least. Did you see that?
Well, things are rough.
World
It's not a
Series
great
game?
time. You're right. It's although today's election day, so are you? And I wanted to ask you about that. Are you going to be like glued to CNN or MSNBC or one of the cable networks tonight, CBS, when the returns start coming in?
No, I don't think I am. I do expect the Democrats to win all of those races. At least the polls say that. They're ahead in all the polls. And California also ahead with yes on 50. So I'm just expecting the Democrats to do well. It's the only, election we've got this year, and it's not a lot. But, if Democrats could at least start to get some momentum, that's good.
Well, there's four elections, actually. We're talking about California. That may be the most important, even though there's not an individual on the ballot, but rather Gavin Newsom's Proposition 50. So we'll get to that. I'm going to start, as I so often and so tragically do, on Halitics in the Middle East, although the news isn't quite as awful. I mean, I hate to say that's just because it's always so bad, but you do have some rough situations. Obviously, it remains very, very bad in Gaza. From Al Jazeera, thousands in overcrowded shelters amid continued Israeli shelling. So Israel, not as nobody I think really believed they would, observing the ceasefire, trying to blame it on Hamas and everyone, but taking zero ownership of what they're doing. But nevertheless, that said, the ceasefire for now continues to sort of quasi hold. Trump's approval rating apparently up slightly because of this. Do you think, and we had talked about this before, Earl, and I won't give him any credit for it, but I guess it's maybe better than it would have been without, otherwise. I don't know.
Well, he's going to take credit for anything that even remotely resembles good. But, I've noticed his poll numbers really haven't gone up, and he's, they're not looking that good, I don't think. So that encourages me, because more and more, like the Tom Hartman article says, there's some bad things going on in this country, inflation and, job loss and all these people cut off from their food stamps. There's a lot of bad news out there economically. I think people can see that, and they know that it's not looking good for him right now, I don't think.
Well, you're exactly right when it comes to approval ratings. I didn't queue up the video, but CNN did show earlier today, I believe, that Trump's approval rating now at 37% is the lowest of this term. So in other words, at least according to the CNN tracking poll, Trump is less popular now, or to put it a different way, more unpopular now than he has been at any point since he regained the White House in January. So that certainly, I guess, would be good news for Democrats, and they're doing better on the generic ballot. Is it enough, in your opinion, for the Democrats? And we're going to really delve into this, but it's triggered, of course, a conversation right now just by that little headline there that I highlighted. Trump's approval on Gaza rises. I just don't think he deserves any credit. I guess he arm twisted the victims of the Israeli genocide into taking what appeared to be slightly less awful outcome than just ongoing mass slaughter that the Israelis were perpetrating. But that said, except for that little highlight there, Trump's approval ratings are low. Clearly, the generic ballot suggests Democrats are on the rise, although I saw a report somewhere, somebody saying that Republicans were winning the battle of the of the shutdown, that does not appear to be the case. By all the polling that I've seen, all the data I've seen suggests that most people blame the Republicans for it. They want the Medicare and Medicaid cuts restored, is the bottom line. Is it enough for the Democrats to be the anti-Trump and to campaign to the extent they campaign on anything? It's basically back to Biden, such as restore the Medicare and Medicaid cuts, or do they need to have provide a united platform demanding something better, a better deal for the American people?
I don't know if you saw 60 Minutes on Sunday, but Trump is just so predictable. He just takes credit for everything that could be counted as good, even if it's not. And, his base, of course, will go along with it. And, he says, oh, I've ended 7 wars. He can't name them. He probably doesn't know where the countries are, but, he'll as we know, he'll lie about all kinds of things and take credit for all kinds of things and deny anything that doesn't look good. So, that's just who he is. And, I think people are hopefully going to start understanding that better, because I think he's kind of losing it a little bit more than usual. He's going for this, the ballroom and, knocking down the east wing of the White House. I think, people don't like that. And he just built this, multi-million-dollar bathroom in the White House. And he did this great Gatsby party last night, despite the fact that, so many people are really suffering out there.
Yeah, I'm with you on the Great Gatsby party. I thought that was incredibly tone deaf. It was arrogant. It clearly will offend many people. Democrats need to make hay of that, although, of course, they have their own issues with big parties. I'm just thinking of when AOC was at that Met Gala with the fancy dress that said "Eat the Rich," but of course she was hobnobbing with the very people she was telling her voters that they should eat. Don't forget, click subscribe and click that bottom right blue and white square that says Halitics on it. If you want to subscribe, we always ask you to also like our videos, any kind of interaction, comments, positive or negative, will help us beat the algorithm. And we continue to see that trickle of increased number of subscribers, so I'm pleased about that. And once I get over this cold, you may be able to hear it. I'm really going to double down or knuckle down and really push for more growth. But right now, it's enough for me to just do this program. Arlen, we both agree Trump is a really bad president. You and I had a show I thought was outstanding. I don't remember how many views we got. Maybe not that many, not as many as I hoped. But I took the position Trump wasn't the worst president of all time. I'm still not quite there that he's the worst, although I'm willing to concede that he has been a worse in this term than I had anticipated. But the vice president of one of the presidents that I believe was arguably, certainly, and probably at one point, I believe was worse than Trump, at least after Trump's first term, just died. So Dick Cheney, Torturer Dick, I refer to him not affectionately, known as the architect of the Iraq War, died at 84. What are your thoughts on this?
Well, he's got a lot to answer for in his long career. He was essentially responsible for us getting into the Iraq War, and that certainly was a disaster. I think he pushed, the CIA, he pushed George W. to, invade, and it turned out to be, a worthless, like almost all our wars that we fight overseas. We lose, it never comes out quite the way we want it to. So I'll give him some credit, though. Lately, he's been saying some nice things, probably thanks to his daughter, Liz Cheney, right? He's gotten to be a little bit more mellow, a little bit more, liberal about things, and very much anti-Trump. In fact, he voted for Kamala Harris, I understand.
Well, if you're Joseph Stalin and you defeat Hitler on the battlefield, how much credit? I mean, you get credit, I guess, for defeating Hitler, but it doesn't erase all your crimes, right? I mean, all the millions of kulaks and others that Stalin killed are still dead, notwithstanding the fact that he stopped Hitler from taking control of Russia. So I guess I asked Cheney. He fomented this war along with his buddies at PNAC, people like Bill Kristol. We were talking about this off air. Even some of the Hillary Clinton team, I believe, were pretty supportive, or were very supportive. Robert Kagan, other neocons, Kagan's wife, Victoria Nuland, supporters of that war. Hillary voted for it. Joe Biden voted for it. I mean, does this absolve Cheney of the sin of fomenting this terrible war? A war, by the way, that he had never fought. He was not a soldier. He had avoided the draft during the Vietnam years. In fact, I think he famously said he had better things to do. At least his president was in the Texas Air Guard. A guy who unapologetically defended torture, and whose criticism and disdain for Trump in part may have stemmed from Trump's criticism of that war.
Yeah, well, he certainly whatever good he's done doesn't come anywhere close to erasing all the terrible things he did, all the hundreds and thousands of people that died because of the Iraq War, which was unnecessary. And he probably cooked the books on a lot of the intel. He probably, Colin Powell, I don't think is ever going to forgive him for making Colin Powell look kind of stupid by saying there's weapons of mass destruction. So, overall, Cheney's been, one of the worst people in government, I think. And I think he deserves the often used nickname of Darth Vader.
Yeah, called the architect of the Iraq War by Axios and some others. I also did see Darth Vader. I was a little surprised when I read that architect of the Iraq War because, it's funny. My memory plays tricks on me. We were talking about this. I started KRXA 540 AM back in July. At least that was, I believe, our first broadcast was July 1st or June 30th, somewhere around there. 2005. So the Iraq War was still very fresh in our minds. They had begun it 2 years earlier in 2003, they being W and Cheney. But I don't really remember seeing Cheney as the one who kind of ran us into that war any more than Rumsfeld or, again, some of those PNAC guys. But it does appear that he was really the prime mover. Is that your recollection as well, Arlen?
Yeah, because he definitely had the ear of George W. George W. Bush said, Dick Cheney helped me find a vice president that will be good for me. And Cheney, recommended himself. So he became vice president. And I think George W. listened to him and figured he knows a lot more than I do. So I think I got to give responsibility for that war mostly to Dick Cheney, I think.
Arlen Grossman with us on Halitics. Great to talk to Arlen. He is the thought leader, although I now just put Big Picture Report, thebigpicturereport.com, and that is where he blogs. We're going to delve into one of his recent posts, although not the most recent. I was interested. There was one even later than the latest from Thom Hartmann. So we'll get into that. And Hartmann, again, kind of counseling a wait-and-see attitude for Democrats, as far as I could tell, just telling us how awful Trump is, criticizing Trump's supporters, demonizing Trump's policies, and often with good reason. We'll delve into that, but I did want to talk about Dick Cheney. Final thought that I have on Cheney, and I'll get yours. I'm not taking any victory laps or any joy about Cheney's being dead. I think Cheney was one of the worst people in American history. I think he was one of the greatest villains we've seen. Killed so many people. And my metric is always how many people did you kill? But the fact is he was out of power. He wasn't doing any harm. When people who have a lot of power die and they're the people who do harm, if someone like a Clarence Thomas or a Alito or one of those really bad right-wing justices died, I wouldn't be happy now because Trump would replace them. And so you get another terrible justice for another 20 years or so. But if somebody who's doing harm dies and they're not replaced by someone even worse, then I can say, okay, well, there's some benefit there. We can't deny that we're better off that this person is underground. I don't feel that way now about Cheney just because he had no power. So I just look back at this as one of the villains of our history who's now gone.
Yeah, one of the biggest villains, I would agree. You know, he kind of represented all the kind of bad things about the Republican Party and the military hawks and all that. I will say one thing was one decent thing, though. He and his daughter went to the anniversary of the January 6th riot, and no other Republicans did. So I'll give them a little bit of credit. And as I said to you before, Dick Cheney actually endorsed Kamala Harris over Trump.
All right, Arlen, ending with what he perceives as some positive actions by the Cheney family. I'm not as sanguine about Kamala Harris endorsement, but fair enough. I guess it's less bad than endorsing Trump. Arlen, today we talked about this as election day. You are a Californian, born and raised, and still primary residence is the Golden State, although you are now in the Green Mountain State, which is interesting because, and there's a lot of interesting kind of distinctions there. For example, California is the most populous state, and Vermont may be, am I wrong? Is it the least populous state, Arlen? It may well be.
It's certainly right along with anybody. It's definitely very low.
Maybe North Dakota, I'm thinking, or Wyoming, but Vermont is right there. So quite an interesting distinction. But both are blue.
Yeah, I think they're the bluest states of all. So, I'm very fortunate. I could be at one end of the country, California, and then come to the other end. And I live part of the year in Vermont. So, I don't do too badly when it comes to the people around me politically.
You don't have to hang around with those nasty MAGA people, at least not so many as you would in other places. Yeah, Arlen, let's get to this election. I mentioned it's election day. In Virginia and in New Jersey, they're going to be electing a new governor. I believe both states have a one-term rule. Maybe it's two in New Jersey. I'm not really sure. But Mikey Sherrill versus Schitterelli. That is how he pronounces it, by the way. In New Jersey, very tight race there. Looks like Abigail Spanberger's opened up a lead in the New Jersey race against, I always forget, who is she running? Oh, Winsome Earl Sears, of course. And then we have the mayor's race in New York, which really is captivating me, Arlen. That's the race that I care most about. Yeah. I really will be brokenhearted. And I am not saying that melodramatically. I will be brokenhearted if Mamdani loses. But let's go to California. Some are saying this is the most important election. Do you think, Prop Fit, before we even play this clip here and the man whose eyes, he looks kind of bug-eyed. I guess I froze him at the wrong point. That's a California anchor or announcer, but he's got the White House behind him, not Sacramento Tower. Arlen, how important is this Prop 50 race in your opinion?
I think it's very important. Trump and the Republicans and the MAGA people are working extra hard to, give themselves advantages in as many states as possible with gerrymandering and, getting voters off of rolls that they think will vote Democratic. So, and then when, Texas decided to redistrict and they gained like 5 seats for the Republican Party, the Democrats felt they had no choice but to do the same thing in California because California is such a big state and it could be done. And Gavin Newsom has, thoroughly endorsed that stand. And so far, from what I understand, the polls are favorable for yes on 50.
By the way, quick shout out to Ken in the chat. Hey, Ken, how you doing? Thanks for the shout out to us. Real quick, we'll play about 30 seconds of this clip just to sort of set the table, and then more from Arlen.
Voters set to head to the polls across the country on Tuesday, and specifically in California, they could help determine the balance of power in Washington. That's because Proposition 50 is on the ballot there. It would allow the state to redraw its congressional districts as part of a nationwide battle over redistricting brews. And a poll is out this week from the Public Institute of California that shows that 56% of likely California voters support the measure, while 43% are against it. So joining me now is the chair.
All right, so we'll skip. We don't need to, but basically there's the bottom line, Arlen, and you can see, as you suggested, The polling does look good for Prop 50. I think California's an interesting state when it comes to polling, but you must have sort of mixed feelings, I would think, because Arlen, weren't you part of a commission that discussed how to make Arlen, not Arlen, you're Arlen, how to make California less hyper-partisan and to have a kind of a more, I guess, a better political environment? And you recommended independent districting, did you not?
I did, and I still think it's the best way to go. But under these particular circumstances, I don't think we have any choice. If Trump
do you think it's somewhat hypocritical when to call for the blue states to do what we all condemn the red states are doing?
Well, you have to fight back. Otherwise, they're just going to gain enough power that Democrats won't have any chance in any elections. So, and this, I think, is particularly important election for Gavin Newsom. If he somehow lost and then the no vote won, I mean, he would look really bad, and it would really hurt him a lot. So, but like the polls say, it's probably going to win. I'm hoping some other states will do the same, at least to counteract what the Republicans are doing, where they're basically cheating everywhere around the country.
Yeah, I'm with you on this one, Arlen. I remember I had an interview once with a guy who said he was with some sort of right Republican front group in California saying that the electoral vote should be apportioned by congressional district. So whatever each congressional district went for in California, whoever they went for, that's who the electoral vote should go to. And I said, if you did that, you'd have more Republican electoral votes from California, which would lead to less, which would lead to general elections that were less representative of what the will of the people was. I mean, if we agree that most the majority should decide elections, you'd be moving away from that because already Democrats have a disadvantage. Already Democrats lose elections where they get a majority of the votes or a plurality, which is what happened in 2000. I believe it may have happened in 2004. I'm not sure. I think maybe Bush had a plurality then, right. But it happened in 2000 and it happened in 2016. Trump got fewer votes than Hillary. So that's right. You're actually moving away from democracy if California unilaterally disarms. What California would be doing here would actually be balancing the scales a little bit, matching what Texas is doing to a degree. And you can see here that if California redistricts, I didn't know Virginia was contemplating this, but if California, Virginia, New York all are able to do this, the Republican advantage will shrink a little bit to only two or three seats unless we see more of those states also redistrict. And Arlen, this is really crucial because the House is so close right now that even if the Democrats get more votes next year in the midterms, the Republicans still could maintain the House because of this gerrymandering scheme.
And also, I'm sure you know how Mike Johnson has kept the Republicans out of the House, out of Washington, D.C. for such a long time. And he's not willing to seat the Democrat who won an election in one of the states that could possibly change the votes in the House so that the Epstein records would have to come out. So,
that's Halitics Grijalva. It's horrible. She's a Arizona congresswoman just elected. First term, it's really bad, Arlen. I mean, this goes to the argument by the New York Times that we don't live in democracy. Not that we probably had one before, but it's really, really bad. Anything else you want to say? It does look like this will prevail in California, and I'm pleased about that for sure.
Yeah, we've got to do whatever we can to, push back on the Republicans cheating because, Trump is telling all the red states, hey, you got to do the same thing, redistrict, get some more red seats. The Democrats have to, counter that. Otherwise, they're just going to never win an election from now on.
Let's move to the city which never sleeps and also the one where I was born. Arlen, is this an issue for you? Zoran using a little jiu-jitsu there in this email I got yesterday. Congratulations, Andrew Cuomo. I know how hard you worked for this. Trump endorses Cuomo. Is Zoran wise? This is a good political move to mock Cuomo for getting the endorsement of Trump.
Of course. And I think even Elon Musk endorsed Cuomo. So, I think all those things are eventually going to hurt Cuomo. I mean, he's already behind in the polls, and he's just going to be more behind because Mamdani is a very effective candidate. He's out there, very energetic, talking very well, doing a good job, and I see no reason that he's going to lose. He's probably going to win quite handily.
Well, I'm a little bit nervous. There were a couple of polls by this very well-regarded pollster, Atlas, which was the number one highest-rated pollster in 24, and I believe in 2020 or 22 as well, by Nate Silver, that showed a much closer race. The most recent poll came out, I believe, yesterday by Atlas, only showing Mamdani up by 4.5 points. All the other polls have a double-digit lead for him. Nate Silver discusses that in his Silver Bulletin, says that he certainly fully expects Mamdani to win, but he doesn't say it's an absolute guarantee lock because of those Atlas polls. That got me a little nervous. There are a lot of reasons to be skeptical of those polls by Atlas. Atlas is a Republican-leaning pollster, even if they've been pretty accurate in recent years. And some of that accuracy really, compared to other pollsters, is because they were they predicted Trump would win both in 2020 and 24. And that could have been, well, in 20, I guess in 20 he lost, but they were very close in 20. And then in 24, they had him beating Harris when most of the other polls had her with a slight advantage. So that's why Atlas is better reputed.
Yeah, right now I'm looking at the New York Times for today. They have polls on the New York City mayor race, New Jersey governor race, the Virginia governor race, and it all looks good, all favorable for Republicans and for Mamdani.
For the Democrats.
Yeah. And I'm looking at the polls, and Mamdani is ahead 5, 7, 16, 20, 26. So, I don't think there's any
well, the 5 and 7 are that one pollster I mentioned, Atlas. That's the one pollster that provides a closer race. And there's reasons, as I said, they oversampled. It certainly appears that they oversampled Republicans in their polls. I looked into the tabs. They had 2.5 or 3 times as many Democrats as Republicans that they sampled, but the voting right now has been 5, 6 times as many Democrats as Republicans voting. So that suggests they're undercounting the support for Mamdani, since they have more Republicans in the sample than are voting in the actual election. Now, the flip side of that is, I heard a person make this point, I thought it was a fair one, is people may be Democrats who identify as Republicans, even if they're registered as Democrats. They may, Trump got, I think, 30% of the vote in New York City, something like that, 25%. So there may be some Democrats who say they're Republicans. That could be part of this. But even in that poll, even in the poll that's by far the most favorable for Cuomo, Mamdani's still ahead, and ahead above the margin of error. So I think we have to feel confident.
And I think the coup de grace will be endorsement by, somebody like Trump, because, New York City is a very liberal city, and, Trump's endorsement is certainly not going to help Cuomo. So I think, that looks even better for Mamdani. And
you don't think, you would say similarly, rather, you mentioned the Musk endorsement will also redound to Mamdani's benefit.
And he's run a terrific campaign, Mamdani. He's been everywhere. He's been all over the television. He's been campaigning really hard, and he comes across very well, very personable kind of a guy with some great ideas. And sure, there's the establishment Democrats are a little worried about him, and some of them calling him, a communist or something. But I think I'll be very happy when he does win, and I'm pretty sure he will.
Arlen, I wanted your take, and I may have mentioned this or asked you about this before, but how do you react to the fact that the two most powerful Democrats in Congress, how they responded. Hakeem Jeffries did endorse, but in kind of a very weak and unenthusiastic endorsement. Chuck Schumer point blank refuses to even discuss his refusal to endorse Mamdani. How does that make you feel about those two leaders and about their party more generally?
Well, I think you and I will agree that they're very ineffective leaders for the Democratic Party. Schumer's too old to, he's the one that said, "Oh, let's go along with the, government continuing," and got in a lot of trouble for it in the spring, I think it was. But now he's, changed his mind. But still, he's very moderate, very careful, and same with Hakeem Jeffries. He's a smart guy, but he's not willing to do anything that would even come close to being radical or something that would be helpful for the Democrats.
So you would agree with me that from a pure strategy standpoint, they're making a big mistake. In other words, they're hurting their party.
Yeah, there's some good Democrats out there who are, pushing hard, like Bernie Sanders, AOC. Hopefully, Mamdani will be one of those. And but there's also a few moderates that are in the party, and I think those are the ones that I think Schumer and Hakeem Jeffries are trying to appease, and I don't think it's a good idea.
Let's spend just a few minutes, unless you had something else to add with respect to the New York race. I've been talking about it quite a bit. I don't have anything else myself, but I don't know if you had any final thoughts. Otherwise, we can move to Virginia, Arlen.
Yeah, let's move, because I think we pretty much got a lock on New York City, in my opinion.
So here's the Virginia race. This is from Real Clear Politics. You mentioned, Arlen, that the New York Times, which pretty much prints the same poll numbers, I believe, it looks pretty much over to me. New York City is much more variable. One day one guy's up and the next day someone else is. I don't see that a double-digit lead for Abigail Spanberger is going to change. When you look at that, you see every poll giving her well above the margin of error. Even that Atlas Intel pollster that I am troubled by, even the Republican pollster Trafalgar Group, it's pretty much a foregone conclusion. And I guess my question to you is, what does this tell you about Trump's popularity going into next year's midterms?
Well, I think Virginia is a pretty good state. They're not like West Virginia, where you count on them being Republican. But I think Virginia, given decent candidates, will vote for the right ones. And in this case, they'll vote for the Democrat, and I think that'll help.
Well, I was just looking to see who won it in 24, the Commonwealth there, and it was indeed Kamala Harris. It was close for a while, but in the end, the Northern Virginia suburbs carried the day for her. I think one of the predictors folks are looking at, one of the tells is, does the Northern Virginia vote turn out? If there's a very big pro-Spanberger, pro-Democratic vote in Northern Virginia, that's a bad sign for Trump. That tells you that the federal workers, a very large number of whom live in Northern Virginia, are activated. They're upset about the shutdown. They're more upset about the layoffs, especially if they were laid off themselves. That could augur ill next year for Trump and the Republicans.
I think it will. I mean, there's no doubt about it. A lot of people are hurting really bad, and they're getting worse off. And, people who aren't so bad off know people who were in those positions. And so they don't feel too good about the economy and what Trump is doing. So, all that augurs well, I think, for the Democrats, but there's so much more time to go. They may do well in this off-year election, but 2028 is a long way away.
All right, one more question for you, Arlen, about this race. So the Republican is an African-American woman, Winsome Earl Sears. She is the lieutenant governor currently in the state to Glenn Youngkin. And much has been made of the fact that President Trump actually has not endorsed Winsome Earl Sears. He has not appeared at any events with her, as far as I know, and has pointedly declined to formally endorse her, although he has apparently said some pretty positive things about her on occasion. Some are saying that this reflects his racism. He's not going to end sexism. He won't support a black woman, even if she's a diehard MAGA Republican, which indeed Winsome Earl Sears is. Have you any comment on that?
For sure, Trump is a racist. I think the evidence is overwhelming about that. And I don't know if she's asked for Trump's endorsement or not, but if she's going to get any kind of endorsement from Trump, it's going to be very, very mild, not like if she was a white man.
Well, like Hakeem Jeffries' endorsement of Mamdani, perhaps. Yeah, it is. It's really hard for me to understand why Trump hasn't endorsed Earl Sears, I have to say. She has always been there for him, always defending him to her communities. And it's such a low-hanging fruit. I mean, what has it caused him to endorse her? It does make him look bad. The only thing I can think of besides, yes, the racism, but he's a racist, sure, but he's worked with black people. I mean, he'll do what he needs to do to win. Although I'm not really aware, are there any in his cabinet? I guess I'm trying to think about this one now.
I think there was like 100 positions, and like 2% of them, like two people were black. In one recent statistic I saw.
It's it's very low. He really doesn't have the diversity, at least when it comes to African Americans, that previous presidents in recent years have had. And that's unfortunate, but that is who Trump is. It's also interesting, given that he got more support, at least from black men, than recent Republicans have. In any event, it does surprise me that he hasn't endorsed Earl Sears. Beyond the racism explanation, which I think must be part of it, and sexism too, she is a woman. I think the other possibility is he just thinks she's going to lose and he doesn't want to be associated. He's only a winner. He's a winner. He doesn't want to be part of a loser. So maybe that's it. No. That's all I can guess, Arlen.
Well, also, no, I think it's basically if she was let's put it this way. Trump always goes for his base. His base is what he leans to, who he campaigns for. And obviously black women are not, part of his base. So he can't get that excited or enthusiastic about it because she doesn't really belong to, his typical candidate.
Yeah, but she is an evangelical Christian, and that is a big part of his base. And the evangelical vote will support her in Virginia. But that's all I believe that will support.
I think the numbers. Sears. He's just not going to support her. He's not interested in a black woman, and even if she's an evangelical and MAGA, it just doesn't fit with the theme of his supporters.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think that's probably the best explanation there is. All right, there's another race in Virginia I am going to just very briefly highlight because it's got a lot of media attention. This is for Attorney General. It's an important election. Obviously, Attorney General is an important position, especially in the age of MAGA, and especially when prosecutions are weaponized for political purposes. And what I find really interesting, although I'm not that surprised, is that the Democrat Jay Jones appears to have clawed his way back into either a tie or even possibly a slight lead. Now, he fell way behind the MAGA candidate, Jason Miyares, who has been endorsed by Trump, I believe, when text surfaced that of Jones musing in tweets and text of that he would, he had wanted bullets for various Republicans in the Virginia legislature, that he would like to shoot certain people. And it certainly didn't look good. I mean, to me, it didn't look good. and I'm sure it turned people off. And I said Arlen, I would still vote for him because, I vote based on policy, but it wasn't a good look. And yet, and I think what this tells you, at least I just want to make one final point, is even when confronted with very violent texts fantasizing about violent death for your political opponents, most people just vote based on policy. This time, people are upset about MAGA. They're upset about Trump. In Virginia, there are more Democrats than Republicans. They're going to vote for they're going to mostly likely to come home to the Democrat.
I think what will help Jones is I think the trend in all the elections is a little bit toward the Democrats. So, he may be able to come up at the end and win by a small margin. But I really haven't followed that particular race, so I'm not an expert.
Well, this is what came out in text messages. Jay Jones wrote about shooting then Virginia House Speaker Todd Gilbert. So this is a prominent Virginia Republican. The House Speaker, Jones wrote in text message he sent to another Republican state to a delegate, Gary Coyner. He wrote, 3 people, 2 bullets, Gilbert, Hitler, and Pol Pot. Gilbert gets 2 bullets to the head. And then Coyner said, Jay, please stop. But then he later called her and said that if the speaker Gilbert's children died, that might cause him to change his views. This was about gun control and how the House Speaker was totally against. The Republican House Speaker was stopping common sense gun regulation. Now, I agree with Jones on the law, but the proposed legislation, but obviously it wasn't a good look. Let's just put it that way.
No, it's the wrong thing to say. He made a terrible mistake, I think. But the fact that he's clawed back, I think, is a good indication that he may end up winning at the end.
Well, again, policy is what counts. This is what I say over and over again. This is what voters look to as policy. And Democrats make a terrible, terrible mistake when they focus on rhetoric and they focus on messaging rather than on having pro-worker, pro-peace, pro-environment policies. All right, last race, Arlen, I promise you, and then we're going to get to a couple of stories that Arlen wanted to discuss. And I think they're good stories, too. I think one is one that I wanted, so a third story will kind of juxtapose them. So this is the New Jersey governor's race. This is much closer, Arlen. But even so, the Democrat Mikey Sherrill, who apparently had a double-digit lead as recently as this summer, now down into the 1, 2, 7 in the Fox News poll, which I frankly credit more than the Atlas poll at this point. It does look like Sherrill will probably pull this one out. Have you followed this at all? Do you have any thoughts on the Garden State?
Well, I know it's a tougher state to win, than, let's say, Virginia. But the fact that, I see a lot of blue there, Sherrill, leading. So that's encouraging, but obviously it's going to be a little bit closer than some of the other races.
Yeah, well, remember, New Jersey, like Virginia, has had Republican governors in recent years. Example, Chris Christie was the governor of New Jersey, I believe 1, 2 terms. So it's not, and then Phil Murphy, 1, 2 terms. So Phil Murphy is term limited out. He took the reins of the state in 2018 after Christie had served. So they do go back and forth. It would be a nice hold for the Democrats to keep that governor's seat if Sherrill can hold on. And I would be honestly somewhat surprised if she didn't. In fact, the race, again, that keeps me up is Mamdani. He's the one real progressive running. He's the one who's been, honest and critical of Israel. He's the one that the billionaires are terrified of. And so, and I think wrongly so, he's not going to take their money. I wish he would, but I don't think he will. But it would be nice, at least if a few of those malefactors of great wealth suffered a little bit, at least anticipating that maybe Mamdani will take we'll dust off the old guillotine and put it down there in Battery Park for their heads when they come out of Wall Street, their Wall Street caves and skyscrapers. So we'll see what happens, Arlen.
I have a thought too, and then I think I think the American people, I think, are getting kind of tired of Trump, and maybe they'd like to send him a message, and that's what I think what they'll be ending up doing in these races today, and I think that's all helpful, and I'll take it.
Well, what you're saying is a lot. I think what our friend Zoran Mamdani is thinking, and that's why he is highlighting and campaigning front and center against Trump by tying him to Cuomo. So I think that's very smart of Zoran. And again, look, I'm worried about that Atlas poll, even though it shows Zoran winning, but it's narrower. But man, the early voting numbers are so favorable to him. There's so many younger voters, Arlen, and it's a high percentage of registered Democrats, higher than we usually see. It's hard to see Zoran losing. That said, it's politics. It's a horse race, and sometimes the unexpected happens. My son believes, and I like your thoughts on this before we get to Thom Hartmann. My son believes that if Zoran loses, that means there's something rigged, there's something fishy. I tend to agree with that maybe he and Cuomo somehow figured something out, Trump and Cuomo, but how do you prove that? How do you, obviously we just have to hope that doesn't happen.
I don't think that's likely possible because New York is not the kind of state that would have people that would do that. New York is a progressive state, democratic state, and I think all the momentum is going for Mamdani, and also a lot of money. I understand Democrats are putting more money than Republicans are in a lot of these races because the Democrats really have something to prove. And
I think that's probably true in Virginia and New Jersey. Maybe not the case in Manhattan, New York City, where Cuomo is getting billionaires writing him checks. They're not $1 billion checks, but he's getting billionaires writing him checks. All right, what if Trump is weaker than we think? That's, I guess, what Zoran believes. And America's finally figuring out, this is by Arlen's favorite podcaster, Thom Hartmann, the Hartmann Report. So why did you find this? And by the way, Arlen, just so you know, which you probably already did, I'm going to have some harsh words for Mr. Hartmann. I didn't particularly like what he wrote. But before you hear my excoriating him, maybe I won't excoriate him, criticism, what did you find was important or that spoke to you in this piece?
Well, he was writing things that I've been thinking about for a while, and that is Trump is just getting worse in so many ways. He seems more psychotic. He's crazier. He does stupid things more. Like the interview in 60 Minutes, he looked really bad there, and he just I think people are more and more aware of the kind of things that he's doing and how it's hurting the average working person. I can't believe that, Black people and Hispanic people are going to vote for him like they did before. So, I think he's going to start losing some momentum. And I think if that's the case, that'll be good for the Democrats.
So this is from the Big Picture Report. That's where Arlen blogs, thebigpicturereport.com. And this is actually not Thom Hartmann's writing, but that of the TBPR editor. Now, am I right in assuming that's you, Arlen? I just sort of figured TBPR editor. First of all, I was like, what's TBO, the Big Picture Report? And then it is you. Am I right? That's you saying that.
You got it right. Yeah, the Big Picture Report editor. Yeah, I was just wanted to emphasize that what Hartmann was saying sounded really good to me. I think, the trend is not good for Trump. I think he's, starting to lose more and more support. And if it continues that way, then, who knows what's going to happen. But it might be better than it looks now.
So I don't disagree with what's written. I really, like I said, I'm being critical of Hartmann. I don't disagree with this. I think it's true. But my problem with it is what my problem always is with, especially Hartmann's criticism, but others, Robert Reich to a significant degree, Nick Kristof to a significant degree, although less so with Kristof, the New York Times is that the focus is 100% on Trump. There's no discussion of why Trump won, who he beat, what the response to Trump should be. For example, Hartman goes on about how bad Trump's policies are, including policies that Hartman has himself supported in the past, such as tariffs. Although I get it, tariffs are not all created equal. Some make sense, some don't. Trump uses the most he uses them to retaliate and all sorts of, but not retaliate against cheaters in trade, but just people he decides he doesn't like, or to reward his allies and that kind of thing. So yes, Trump is a really bad president. But again, I guess I'll put it this way. Does it frustrate you the way it frustrates me that Hartman doesn't, if he mentions it all, he barely in passing mentions the Democrats? It's as though this is just Trump's show, and either he bombs or he hits. Either he kills on stage or he bombs, and the Democrats have nothing to say about it one way or the other.
Boy, you mentioned you're pretty negative about all my favorite writers, Nick Kristof, Robert Reich, Tom Hartman.
Sometimes I like what Reich and Kristof do, to be fair. I do. And I've said that. I'm probably not as, there have been some good pieces by them. But you see, my criticism is they treat Trump as though he's just this unique actor on stage, and there's no acknowledgement or recognition. No, it's not like a one-man show. This is, if it's a boxing match, they don't mention the other boxer. It's just like he's out there, and either he's going to throw a punch and fall on his face, or he isn't. But that's not politics. There's two sides at a minimum.
Well, certainly you have to acknowledge that Tom Hartman is about the most prolific writer there is. He's writing something, one or two or more things every day, and putting out books like every month, it seems like. And I'm sure he mentions a lot of those issues that you're talking about, how the Democrats can, get more on the side of the working people and get the right policies. But I think this particular piece, he's emphasizing how bad Trump is doing. He can't get everything in there, but he's, I think he would agree with you that the Democrats have to push for the policies, that'll help the average worker.
I have to say, Arlen, that was a pretty good answer that you gave, that this is just one piece, and I'm sure there's others, but this is something I have noticed in Hartman's writings. It seems like he has an inveterate focus on Trump, and just Trump is this horrible, evil monster, without acknowledging how Trump came to power, what the failings of the Democrats were that led to him taking power. And by the way, what the failings of his own party were. Remember, in 2016, 2015, he campaigned against Little Marco and low energy Jeb and Ted Cruz. I mean, he was mocking the leaders in his own party. And that's how he got to power. And I think that it would behoove Hartman, if he wants to give us a full picture of where we are and how we can get to a better place, to lay out the landscape a little more accurately. But yes, these are awful things that Trump is doing. The tear gas, the treatment of Americans in cities is just awful. It's ugly. It's not just immigrants who are getting attacked. Not that it would be okay if it was just immigrants. It wouldn't be, but it's even worse. Yes, the actions with respect to the destruction of the East Wing, I think, are hideous. And also paving over the Rose Garden. Why would you do that? There's something really very disturbing, of course, about Trump. And I buy the fascist attack on him. But if you're going to say that he is president, despite having all these awful characteristics and bad policies, then you have to say, which is what Hartman says, that either the alternative, the Democratic alternative, is really bad, which I would say it is. He doesn't say that. So instead he goes to, let's attack his voters. And I don't I think that's a terrible mistake, Earl, and I just think that's how you lose elections. So let me put this up. This really upset me when I don't get why you would do this. Let me see if I can, having trouble, but he calls them racist, homophobic, misogynistic base. You could make say his pro-peace, his pro-American jobs, his pro-America base, his anti-war base. Look at who he was campaigning against in 24. I think this is a terrible mistake for Hartman to say this, and it's very self-righteous and arrogant as well.
Well, I think Trump is all those things. I think he is racist, homophobic, misogynistic.
But that's fine. But that's what he's calling the base. This is what Hartman's calling Trump's voters.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the voters can see what's going on unless they're just totally focused on whatever Fox News and those copycats, MAGA sources are saying. But I don't know if you noticed, but all of a sudden Trump seems to be getting more mental tests, MRIs.
Trump's got issues. I don't disagree. I think Trump has health issues. Yeah. I'm specifically saying Tom Hartman is wrong to attack Trump voters in very insulting and very self-righteous, in a very insulting and self-righteous way. Tom Hartman is a privileged individual who has, his videos reached hundreds of thousands of people. Maybe some of them reach millions. He's published books. He lives a really good life. Many of Trump voters may have lost jobs. They've seen their work offshored or outsourced. They're barely hanging on. They're trying to do the best for their family. Maybe they have family members who are serving repeated tours in Vietnam, in the Middle East. They were begging Kamala to provide them with some hope, which she failed to do, some change in policies that Biden had pursued that were harmful to them. And for Hartman to just attack those voters, does he think that's going to help Democrats win?
Well, maybe not, but I think there's a lot of truth to what he's saying. A lot of the people that voted for him are homophobic, racist, and misogynistic, and Tom Hartman recognizes that, and maybe not all of them, of course, but Tom Hartman's not a super radical kind of a guy. He's relatively moderate in many ways, so I think he'll be fine. Tom Hartman will be fine.
I am sure Tom Hartman will be fine. I'm saying that this is not the way to reach voters. This is not the way to persuade people, to win friends and influence people. And also, I think it's extremely self-righteous of him to presume that people who vote for Kamala Harris, who couldn't even basically distinguish herself in any way from Joe Biden, that somehow they're superior, that they're sort of better, more deserving individuals.
Well, there's so many factors that we're talking about here. Kamala Harris really didn't get to run a real campaign. Conditions, and Trump is just so he's so overconfident that the people that listen to him must think that he's telling the truth. But I think more and more they could see he's not telling the truth, that things are getting a little bit worse now. And
well, we agree on that. I'm just all I'm doing is calling out the way Hartman framed it in that passage where he attacks Trump voters. I think that's a big mistake. I think it's also not even fair. It's not true. It's not fair. There are many Obama to Trump voters. Did they suddenly become racist, homophobic, and misogynistic overnight? I mean, I don't know. That doesn't work for me at all.
Well, I understand. Those are not wonderful words for him to put out there as to the typical Trump voter, but everything else he says seems to make sense to me. So
more reason for me to criticize Hartman. Hartman, again, in his way, his kind of pedantic way, he compares Trump to Russian strongmen like Putin, the Hungarian, I guess, fascist. I don't know what the right term is, who just won the election there. I forget his name. Maybe you can help me with that. I forget the Russian, the Hungarian.
I know what you're talking about, but yeah.
The Hungarian, whatever his name is, I forget now. Yeah. He says, we're not Russia or Hungary. We're America. We're America. We practiced democracy for 250 years. And again, I think that's a very simplistic statement. There are many examples, and you and I have discussed them in recent years, where under both, look at Torturer Dick. It wasn't democracy that we were torturing people in. That's not democracy where you torture people. It's not democracy where Obama is droning American citizens and killing them. It's not democracy where instead of having any kind of a primary for the presidential nominee of the Democratic Party in 24, they're just anointed by the Democratic elites. So I think, he simplifies it to a point where it just isn't reality. Trump didn't come out of nowhere. He's not just some sort of monster who came out of his cave and we're all, Godzilla is tearing up Tokyo. The road was paved for him.
Well, he certainly got some advantages from the way the Democrats governed. There's no question about that. But he was terrible to begin with. He's been terrible his whole life. I think he does admire, the leaders of Russia and Hungary and any other autocratic country. He's going into Brazil and giving them $40 billion because or
Argentina. And it's a terrible thing. It's a terrible thing that Trump is doing. And the Democrats should absolutely focus on that. They should talk about how that $20 billion should be used, or $40 billion, whatever it is, should be used at home and not to bail out some right-wing autocrat. I agree. Those are really bad policies. My problem is pretending that it's all Trump all the time and or claiming it is, and also demonizing his voters, who are people I presume you want to have vote for you in the next election or your candidate.
Well, I think people will look at Trump and they'll look at the results, and that's how they'll think of Trump, not so much anything else. But I think Trump is at the point now where he's feeling super confident. He seems to be able to do anything he wants. There's nobody that's stopping him. Everybody's afraid of him. So he's going to continue to do all the awful things that he's been doing until, the people begin to notice that the grocery prices are way too high and inflation is high everywhere else. And people are, there's unemployment is lower, and the things are going to start getting worse in this country, and everybody will know Trump is responsible for that.
Arlen Grossman with us. It's Halitics. Let's get to an article I thought was a very good counterpoint to Hartman. This is Selena Zito, and I believe she's a Republican. She's certainly far to the right, I would say, of Hartman, but she writes this piece in the Washington Post, and I thought there was a lot of common sense. I think it really is distinct from what, very the opposite of Hartman in a lot of ways. So Pennsylvania Democrats know the truth about demonizing Trump. Now, I'm no Josh Shapiro supporter. I don't like Josh Shapiro. I don't like his policies, but Zito apparently does. But this is what she says. The Democratic state party leader are focused on winning back lost voters, which it seems to me is exactly right. I mean, that's what you want to do, right? Is get those voters back that you lost. And calling them racist and homophobic and misogynistic, if that's what you believe, then campaign as a racist and a homophobe and a misogynist, but, don't call people that. But that's not what Eugene DePasquale is saying. He's saying that what the Democrats need to do is focus on how they will do things differently and better than Trump. And they should stop obsessing about Trump. So to me, that's kind of the opposite of what Hartman did, right? Hartman just told us how bad Trump is without giving us any alternatives, and he seemed fixated on Trump. So is that fair? Am I being fair here, or am I somehow being unfair?
The Democrats are still trying to figure out the best way to run. Some people are saying, you got to go against Trump because he's doing everything awful. And other people are saying, no, you got to focus on what you could do for the people, and especially working people. And they're going to have to find the right combination of, whatever strategy they come up with. And maybe it's going to be a little bit of both. Obviously, you're going to see terrible things coming from Trump. But at the same time, if you're saying the right things, like the Democrats are doing in, the government shutdown, they're stressing healthcare, they're stressing, health insurance, and people can see that, and I think that's a good thing. And they're not giving in to the Republicans on that.
Well, I agree with you. And this is what Pasquale says, D. Pasquale says. They said Democrats need to have a positive agenda to get working class voters back. So if that's true, and I think it is, then that suggests, does it not, maybe I'm wrong, that they're not all these racist, misogynist, homophobes, or whatever the term was that Hartman used, but rather people who vote based on what they believe where their best interests lie, and Democrats need to address those, need to appeal to those.
Let me say one thing too, Hal. I think you won't get MAGA voters who are reading Thom Hartman. Thom Hartman is, writing for people who agree with him, and probably, don't see anything wrong with saying that his base is misogynistic and racist and all that. So, you might want to keep that in mind too.
Yeah, but but it's a tone. There's a tone that Hartman is presenting to his readers, which is the problem isn't that we aren't helping, we aren't working with, we aren't trying to make the country better for working people. It's that they're bigots. It's that they're racist. It's that they're ignorance. They're ignoramuses. So even if he's not going to offend Trump voters directly, he is sending a message to the people who follow him, that the problem isn't that Democrats aren't able to appeal to working class voters because the policies that the Democrats pursue are bad for working class voters. It's that the working class voters are troglodytes.
I think it's going to be a combination of all of that. I think you have to point out what Trump is doing bad, all the terrible things and illegal things and immoral things that he's doing. And at the same time, you got to make your case for, your policies, which the Democrats have not done a good job of doing. So, I'm hoping that they will do more of that. So, it'll be a combination of both.
No, I agree with you. I think again, what my concern with Hartman again is just where he is attacking Trump voters, not criticizing Trump, not challenging Trump's policies, but where he attacks Trump's voters. And I think the reason he does that is because he has to come up with some explanation for why people would embrace somebody as bad as Trump. And Trump is really bad. But rather than go to the obvious explanation to me, which is that the Democrats are as bad or almost as bad, and in many ways make themselves extremely unlikable, instead of going there, he attacks the voter. And I think that's a mistake on many fronts.
Well, I don't think there's any doubt, though, that the voters in many cases are racist, or in many cases are misogynistic.
We all have our bigotries. We all have our petty anger and resentments towards others. It's not unique to Republican voters. And even if there's some truth to it, why not at least treat them like, address the other ways that they're like human beings, such as Rotimi Adeoye says, we need to talk about kitchen table issues in a way that resonates. We have to talk about good union jobs, healthcare costs, and affordability. Wouldn't that treat voters like they're intelligent, thoughtful people who can, will make the right decision when they're given choices?
Well, I'll tell you what, Hal, when I next speak to Tom Hartman, I will point out that he's probably going a little bit overboard on some of these terrible names. You know, we're all part of that same club, you know, the thought leaders and all that. So
I didn't mean to upset you. I'm saying that what Hartman did is, I was extremely critical on this program about Charlie Kirk. And I have regrets about the language I used. I was harshly dismissive of Kirk. And there's things he did I really, really disliked. What Kirk did that I found most objectionable is exactly what Hartman did. He mocked and shamed people on the other side of the political aisle from him. I couldn't stand that. He tried to pit voters against each other. That's what I couldn't stand. Now, towards the end, he was coming around a little, but certainly on Israel. I didn't realize that when I criticized him. I didn't realize that he was starting to turn on Israel. I didn't realize that. But he pitted poor, struggling, working people against each other using identity, nation of origin, race. I'm not saying he was necessarily a racist, but I know many people say he was definitely racist. I'm not going to quite go that far. What I'm going to say is that he used race to divide people. And I have a huge problem with that. And I believe Hartman was doing exactly the same thing. So I would be, I think, hypocritical if I didn't say what I want Tom Hartman to do is what I wanted Charlie Kirk to do, which was try to bring together the victims of an profoundly unjust and unequal society.
Well, the most terrible thing about his, assassination, one of the most terrible things was the fact that the Republicans made him sound like, almost godlike, that he was perfect, and anybody that criticizes it in any way, Kirk, was some kind of an evil monster. And it got a little bit absurd. So, maybe people, said a few things about him that are actually true, and that shocked a lot of right-wingers, MAGA people who thought, he could do no wrong at all.
So, little more from this piece by Selena Zito. So, and again, I don't necessarily agree with these. I don't necessarily like these Pennsylvania Republicans. I don't like John Fetterman. I don't like Josh Shapiro. I do remember Eugene D. Pasquale. I remember, in fact, supporting him for Congress and disappointed when he lost, I believe, to a real MAGA guy. I forget the guy's name, and there in Harrisburg area. Might be wrong about that. But what this political consultant says about D. Pasquale and how we should talk to voters about kitchen table issues, address their concerns. Here's what Micah says about that. He says, one of the biggest problems I think the Democratic Party has had nationally and in Pennsylvania is coming across as a party of scolds, where you're lecturing people, telling people you made the wrong choice, you're stupid or ill-informed. And when you do that, they're less inclined to like you and they're not going to vote for you. Why not say, hey, we made some really big mistakes as Democrats. We didn't pass a $15 minimum wage. We didn't bring good jobs back the way we promised to. There were lots of things that you could have said to sort of take a little bit of the onus on yourself, rather than just say, the only reason anyone would have ever voted for that guy is because they're a bigot.
Yeah, well, Democrats do make mistakes. They made a lot of mistakes, in the last election, and they'll continue to make mistakes. And, I can understand what you're saying. You don't want to turn off those voters that went for Trump by, calling them names and so on. But the Democrats are just going to have to get into the right combination of criticizing Trump and, pushing their own positive policies. And I hope they do it correctly.
So we'll just wind up this piece and then we'll get into that final one, although we're actually into the second hour here. Other Democratic politicians aren't as courteous. J.B. Pritzker, Ken Martin are known to use words such as Nazi Germany, fascist, or fascism, among other insulting terms about Trump. No problem with that. And his voters, that's where I have a problem. If I want someone's vote, I'm not going to insult them.
Yeah, there's a lot of that. Republicans who talk amongst themselves about, how Nazis aren't so bad after all. And it reflects very badly on Republicans. And if they had any brains, they would make sure that those people are kicked out of the party. And often they are, which is the right thing to do. But yeah, there is a lot of racism in the MAGA base in the Republican Party.
So from the New York Times, this was a piece you had recommended, Arlen, and it goes to what we were talking about before. Are we losing our democracy? You call Trump a fascist, then you're suggesting we're losing our democracy. Again, my big beef isn't so much with calling Trump a fascist, but treating him like he's some sort of unique, monster that just sort of emerged from the swamps rather than descending from the Cheney line. We talk about Cheney, from the Cheney line, from the Obama, Obama, all of them pushing ever more harder the executive power, the blurring executive power and law breaking. And I think Trump falls into that. So all of them helped us lose our democracy. But the Times, as far as I can tell, focuses solely on Trump. But but they're not wrong. They're not wrong.
Yeah. And I think we both will agree that the United States has not been a democracy for a long time, if they ever were. I mean, we've had certainly, people with money have done very well and have the advantage when it comes to voting. And that's gotten only worse with the Supreme Court, saying that businesses are people and there's no limit as to what they can donate to their favorite candidates. So they essentially buy candidates. So yeah, we're far, far from democracy, but Trump is taking us even farther, I think, and we have to be very careful about that.
If you're a working class or you're a struggling American who has trouble paying the rent every month, who's got a family member who's sick and you can't get the health care for them that they need, you can't afford it, maybe you lost somebody in one of our endless wars, why would democracy, and the New York Times is telling you, well, we have this great democracy under Barack Obama. Would democracy look very good to you? Would you say, well, gee, that's something that we must preserve at all costs, is this system that actually has left me in debt, impoverished, barely surviving?
Yeah, like I say, we are not a democracy. We're not even close to a democracy. And, it's just, we have to understand that and find different ways of making it less worse. But yeah, we're not, Trump is only going to make it less worse. He's going to make it so democracy.
Well, he'll make it worse. He's making it worse for sure. He's making it worse.
Our voting system is totally broken. And I don't understand it. I mean, Democrats say, ask for money, give us money, we'll do great things. But, Republicans have all the money. They have unlimited amount of money. I just don't see how the average voter is going to make much difference if that voter gives, $25 or $50 or $100, because somebody like Elon Musk could give, hundreds of millions.
I mean, I think that's a huge problem. And certainly we can point the finger at Citizens United and Buckley v. Vallejo, which I think said that speech, money is speech. There's a lot of very, very unfortunate line of decisions by the court, which ensconced big money at the top of the tree. And obviously that's what we have now. And I don't know how to combat it, Arlen. I wish I did. I mean, that's why I do this program, is to try to stop that. I think where you and I sometimes butt heads a little bit is you tend to perceive Trump. I'm not saying you say he's the only problem or getting rid of Trump would solve all of our problems, but I think you tend to view him as a much bigger part of the problem. I think he's a big part. I'm not saying he isn't, but ultimately I think he's a symptom. And things were going in the wrong direction when Joe Biden and Kamala Harris were in power, and things were going the wrong direction before them. And unless we somehow can muster up the political will to reject these Democrats, then we're going to continue to slide ever further down into the abyss.
Well, I really don't think that Trump is the only real problem here. The real problem, I think, is the people who support him, the libertarians, the far right, Republicans who have, establish think tanks and big media giants, and have that Project 2025. They've been waiting for the moment when something like this would happen, where one of their candidates would win and be pretty much untouchable. And I think that's what they got, and they're going to push it as hard as they can. And I think the rest of the country just has to look a little closer and make sure they're not going to turn us into an autocracy, which we're getting closer and closer to.
But Arlen, if you're going to blame Trump voters, then you must think Trump's the problem, because then you're saying it's not that Biden and Harris were completely supportive of Israel's genocide. You're saying it's not because Biden and Harris supported the endless war and actually fomented endless war with Russia. You're saying it's not because of the free trade bills that Bill Clinton and George W. Bush and Barack Obama signed into law that did so much damage to the heartland. You're saying it's not the omnibus crime bill that Clinton signed into law that led to millions of black families broken up by incarceration, and the war on drugs that Reagan promoted that also was so destructive to families, or slashing taxes on the rich, which he did. So it's the people who voted for Trump. You can only say they're that bad if they had some really good alternative. Now, I say they did, but that alternative was Jill Stein. And if I'm going to blame Trump voters for not voting for Jill Stein, I'm going to be just as fast to blame Democratic voters for not voting for Jill Stein, and Democratic primary voters even more so for voting for Hillary rather than Bernie in 2016.
Well, let me say this, Hal. I think there's plenty of blame to go around. Democrats, Republicans, they're all part of the establishment. They're all doing well, getting good jobs and all the perks and the benefits and money. And, there's hardly anybody that isn't part of that system. And like I said, there's a lot of blame to go around. The only people I think that aren't that bad are people like Bernie Sanders and AOC. But there's not that many of them.
Well, I think, Arlen, we have reached a point of agreement, which is always nice. And let's hope for some good results tonight. I think Mom Donnie probably will win. I think Prop 50 will probably prevail. Those are important. And I do want the two Democrats to win in New Jersey and Virginia. I think it would be very bad if they don't. So we may see some slightly better times ahead.
I certainly hope so. One thing we didn't talk about was how Marjorie Taylor Greene seems to be moving more and more toward the positions that we have, and that shocked me. If you watch the Bill Maher show on Friday night, she looked pretty good, even though she still thinks, she still says Trump is the greatest president and all that.
Well, it'd be very hard for her to break with Trump, and she is in MAGA land, and I think Trump is not happy with her right now, but he still hasn't. But he has gone after Rand Paul very aggressively and Tom Massey very aggressively, so he is certainly not above attacking Republicans. I think she wants to protect her flank to a degree, but I also think Trump is smart enough to know, or at least he has advisors who will tell him that there's no way he's going to defeat Marjorie. He's going to see Marjorie Taylor Greene defeated at the polls next year in a Republican primary. So I think for those reasons, he's going to leave her alone. But yeah, I mean, I'm somewhat pleased with Marjorie. She's been somewhat of a revelation, and
she's obviously
I'm with you there. I'm with you on.
She's obviously woken up to some of the conditions that are going on, and there's a few Republicans that are starting to push back against Trump, and I think a lot of it. I think we have to also watch whether the Epstein files are going to come out.
Which she's very much aggressively pushing, by the way, I believe.
Yes, she is, and I'm very happy about that. And it's
it's been the Election Day special, Arlen. I'm going to ask you if you have a final word. I kind of talked over you, which might have been your final word, but anything else we missed? I know you mentioned, your piece. By the way, let me just promote the bigpicturereport.com. I was trying to remember what Arlen had put more recently up than the Hartman piece, and that is the Marjorie Taylor Greene article, right? It's about her, I guess. It's about her.
Yes. I think it's just fascinating because she was totally, the reverse of the thing she's saying right now. I mean, she was the QAnon queen and Jewish space lasers and all that. So she's, it's like she's starting to think, I hope.
All right, Arlen, thank you so much. Thanks for putting up with me. I know I shouldn't say I know, but I was a little hard on Hartman there and maybe by extension. So if there were hurt feelings, I apologize. I try to keep everything based on policy and words only, nothing else.
No, you're fine. You have your own opinion and you want to express it and you're entitled to it. The show is named after me, so I get to say what I like. This is Halitics. I'll be back tomorrow. It'll be just Hal. And Arlen, last point, my cold has been bad, my sore throat, you can hear it. I am gradually recovering. It's been a long road, but I feel like I'm on the mend trail, so that's a good thing. I'm glad to hear that.
Thanks, folks, for being part of Halitics. Again, thanks, Arlen, so much. I will